Yeah, so plenty on the way for you, as we'll be live to Old Trafford as well and Wembley. But let's start with both Jonathan and Darren. It is a sad morning, but I think what we want to do here today is reflect on the life of Sir Bobby Charlton, because it's quite remarkable. He is an England and Manchester United legend, there's no doubt about it. In your opinion, though, Jonathan, will he be remembered as the greatest England player, perhaps, of all time?
I think he will be. I mean, at times like this, the tributes that come in are often maybe slightly gilded, but in Bobby's case, I don't think anything could be exaggerated. I mean, it was an epic football career that did everything at club level and everything at international level. Those who saw him play, who played with him, always said he was the central figure, the heartbeat, the greatest talent. And I think the longevity of that career, the story of that career, rebuilding him, his life after Munich and helping Manchester United be reborn, being part of their greatest triumph, being part of England's greatest triumph, and what he embodied, the way he played the game. I think he is everything that you want in a footballer. And I was struck by something Arthur Hopcroft, who the great football writer, was quoted in one of the papers today in Matt Dickinson's tribute, where he said, when you think about football, Bobby Charlton is the player that you picture.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, 106 England caps, 49 England goals, which stood for a very long time as well, that record. A World Cup winner, of course, in 1966 as well. And his England goal-scoring record stood, as I said, until Wayne Rooney broke it. I mean, it was a remarkable career.
It was indeed, and for us as journalists, we spent many England games actually having to remember Sir Bobby, because so many of the golden generation tried, failed, before obviously Wayne Rooney came along and managed to break that record, and now Harry Kane. So there is that bridge to that glorious past and the present. Of course, what none of them, Wayne or Harry, managed to do was actually go and do that in the big screen.
Yeah.
And for all the reasons that Johnny just mentioned, you know, he is Mr. Manchester United. His career sums up the invincible spirit of the club, the devastating tragedy that he suffered, that put football, the irrelevance of football, if you like, firmly into perspective. But then the glorious highs, the rebuilding of the club, the dignity with which he represented Manchester United as well. And that triumvirate he formed with David Gill and Sir Alex to restore Manchester United to where anyone of a United persuasion felt the club should be. But of course, he was familiar to millions as an England legend. And do you know, I want to find different words to use other than legend, because I think he is somebody who actually stands outside of that. And for that reason, he is all across the front pages as well. We'll get to the papers in a bit, but he is inside the papers as well. And when you consider what is going on around the world, for one individual to dominate the news agenda, as he has done today, says a huge amount. He is somebody whose artistry, whose genius, whose diligence really does mark him down as an all-time great, a football immortal. And there will be reasons why even younger viewers of our show, of other footballing shows, will go away to Google and to YouTube and to look at his goals and to see why he was such a fabulous player. You mentioned that goal-scoring record. He scored those goals from midfield. Rooney and Kane scored those goals up front, with so many other creative talents around them to supply the ammunition. So in a football context, he was an all-time great, but in a sporting context, I believe his story is an inspiration to any sportsman or woman. Forget footballers, any sportsman or woman who looks at Sir Bobby Charlton, his history, his lows, his highs, his indefatigable spirit, will understand why we are paying these tributes to him today.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. For me, I mean, I was lucky enough to meet him, and I remember feeling like I was in the presence of someone pretty special. You know, you were lucky enough to sit down and converse with him. What was that like?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, that was at a time, 2005, I interviewed Bobby. It was a time I was covering Manchester United a lot, and he was really a big presence at the club, a real sort of, you know, day-to-day presence at that time as one of the directors and a big supporter of Alex Ferguson. And the biggest thing I remember was that the last person he wanted to talk about was himself.
Yeah.
We spoke a lot about Jackie Milburn, who was his mother's cousin. He spoke about Wayne Rooney. He spoke about Duncan Edwards. When I asked Bobby about himself, he brushed over it pretty quickly. Wow. But he was there in his blazer. It was in the director's box at Manchester United. He was 68 at the time, which doesn't seem quite so old to me now, but at the time seemed, he was an old gentleman. But what I remember was that when he started talking about football and he started describing to me a penalty that Jackie Milburn had taken, he got up on his feet and twinkle-toed, he sort of started enacting this penalty and was going through other things that he'd learned watching Jackie, and he really sort of came alive. But it was the understated sort of gentleness of him. And he ended by talking about Jackie Milburn's funeral and saying that on that day, the streets were sort of lined with silent mourners. And he said, well, poor Jackie would have hated that because he didn't like people to make a fuss. And he said,
wonder what he would think of this.
And he said, I only wish I'd known more of him. And I was just thinking yesterday that that's the sense that people had of Bobby Charlton. He didn't want people to make a fuss despite his greatness, but they wanted more of him.
And it is, I use the word patriarch to describe him. And I don't just use that for the footballers as well, for us as journalists as well, because we get excited about so much to do with football right now. And when you look at Sir Bobby's career, having actually achieved the pinnacle on the pitch, having won the European Cup, won the Ballon d'Or, been a runner-up for another couple of years, but also suffered that devastating tragedy. And like I say, we'll talk about that a bit later on, but it kind of puts so much of what we get excited about into context, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a good word, patriarch. I mean, my memory of covering United at that time, and it was an incredible time, heart of the Fergie era, all the ups and downs. But Bobby Charlton was always there on the away trips in his blazer, this kind of presence, this continual presence of dignity and solidity and reference point. And that's how he served the club after the great service he gave on the pitch. A patriarch's a very good way to put it.
I just think that he's United in a modern era, I don't think have ever been taken more seriously than when he, David Gill and Sir Alex Ferguson were at the helm of the club, because they knew about all the values that the club represented, and they embodied the respect. They earned that respect, first of all, because obviously he played that role in bringing Sir Alex to the club. Yeah. But then they established themselves right at the very top, and they stayed there, and they had that almost impenetrable trust, and the players would go on to embody the spirit and the values that he embodied.
Yeah, he was a presence in the dressing room. I mean, I spoke to Peter Schmeichel yesterday. I've spoken to Wayne Rooney about Bobby in the past, and he would come to the dressing room, not to ever offer, advice in the sense that I would have done this, but to offer reassurance and presence, and always wanted to listen to managers. Was a great support of people like David Moyes when they were there. Played a very active role in many ways in that era of success that Ferguson built.
Just finally on this, was he kind of like a quiet genius? Because, I love there's a quote where he says it himself, he couldn't understand how people couldn't do what he could do with the ball. It kind of came so naturally to him. Was he this quiet genius of his day?
He was an absolute genius. And if there's a sort of thing I'd urge anyone to do now is to get onto online and just watch as much as you can of Bobby Charlton, because if he'd been around in the current day, he would have been the perfect YouTube footballer, computer game icon, a player for this sort of visual age, because there was nothing he couldn't do. The goals he scored with either foot were just incredible. Spectacular strike after spectacular strike. Darren mentioned it, he played a lot of his football in midfield with the number 9 shirt, dropping into midfield, almost a new type of footballer. We see Harry Kane doing it so much now. He started on the wing for Manchester United. He could dribble. His passing was sensational. He was a genius, and it was all in the service of the team. And I think Vicky, that's where you're right. There was a quietness to that genius.
OK. Right, a little bit later in the show, we're going to take a look at how the Sunday papers have paid tribute to Sir Bobby. But now we can speak to our reporters, Peter Stevenson and Gary Cottrell, who are at Old Trafford and Wembley, respectively. Good morning to you both. Look, Peter, I'm going to start with you. Talk us through what's happening there at Old Trafford today.
Yeah, good morning, Vicky. It's a lovely, sunny Sunday morning now at Old Trafford, and normally football stadiums, we're used to the noise and the atmosphere, but today there's a calmness, it's quiet, there's a sadness, there's a very poignant feel. The flags are flying at half-mast, and I think what's the main thing today is fans are being invited by the club to come and pay their respects. Of course, the focal point of that is the Trinity statue behind me. Best, Law and Charlton, the three superstars of the team, of course, back in the 1960s. What's been happening today is there's been a steady stream of people bringing floral tributes to add to those already there overnight. Scarves have been laid as well. And what struck me is, to back up what Darren was saying a little earlier, the age range is very much the younger side, parents in their 30s and 40s with their youngsters coming along. No chance that they would have ever seen Bobby Charlton play, but of course the Bobby Charlton story, whether at Manchester United level or whether at England level, is permeated down through the generations, and I think that's what's persuaded a lot of people to come today to pay their respects. And as I say, a lot of sadness, a lot of reflection going on at the moment by a lot of people stood away to my side here. They'll also be invited to sign a book of condolence that opened a short while ago at the other side of Old Trafford. This facility is being open till 10 o'clock tonight, I'm told by the club. Parking isn't an issue, so fans, if they want to come down, this is the place to come. Plenty of other people around here having quiet conversations as well. And it's really just, I think, a sign of the character of Bobby Charlton, isn't it? I mean, he spanned the generations, starting off with all the headlines in 1958, all the way through the Ferguson years, and really generation after generation. That's what made him such a special person, and that's why so many people are making the effort to come down here today. And of course, on Tuesday, Champions League against Copenhagen, and of course the Manchester derby next weekend. It's going to be potentially quite an emotional week for Manchester United off the pitch, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Thank you, Peter, for now. Let's get to Gary Cottrell, who, as I said, was at Wembley for us today. So, Gary, the nation, of course, has lost another member of that 1966 World Cup winning side, hasn't it?
Yeah, another sad day here at Wembley, another sad day for English football, another sad day for world football. This place obviously has changed so much over the years, buildings springing up all around. Of course, now the iconic Wembley Arch has replaced the iconic Wembley Twin Towers, but still a real sense of Sir Bobby Charlton. There were obviously images on this stadium last night of his name, white lettering across a black background. That popped up the moment the sun came down, stayed up all night until sun rose again. As you can see, the sun rising here. Another bright day, perhaps potentially in honour of Sir Bobby Charlton. There were images of him as well last night. Back to normal more now, the stadium, but as I say, a real sense of his presence, not least because of all the goals he scored, all the things he won, all the trophies he won for country and club at this place. Of course, the first goal and the last goal in the 1968 European Cup for his beloved Manchester United, and then the role he played in the 1966 World Cup. The goals he scored to get England to the final, and the selfless final itself, where he was put in charge of marking Franz Beckenbauer too far away from the goal for his liking, but he did it without asking any questions, and that's why there's that sense of him still here. A much more quieter tribute going on at the moment to the one last night. The only statue, really, the only football statue here at the new Wembley is Bobby Moore. It stands right at the front of the main entrance to Wembley. The plinth contains images of all the other players from that famous final. It was actually unveiled by Sir Bobby Charlton in 2007, and behind that a single flag, a St George's flag, flying at half-mast. There'll be more tributes to Sir Bobby Charlton around England's next home game here against Malta next month.
Gary, thank you so much.